Welcome back to Sessions by the Herb Life, a weekly podcast that brings you a new set of hosts every single episode discussing everything cannabis. Our aim is to highlight the tremendous efforts of women living, working and playing in the cannabis arena, while also giving you a direct line into the conversations that are changing the landscape as we know it. My name is Tiana and I am the Sessions facilitator, and this episode we are joined by Jenna Valeriani and Sarah Hanlon, who set out to discuss the pitfalls of the unfolding brick and mortar distribution system in Ontario. And they got well into some more of the challenges and failings around the emerging framework. I have to say, one thing I love about the cannabis industry is the diversity of voices. While it's not perfect, I often see people with different skill sets, personalities, life experiences really gelling on cannabis because it's a theme that seems to permeate so many people's lives. Cannabis, bringing communities together. Maybe that should have been the episode title. Anyhow, Jenna, who recently was appointed CEO of Niche Canada, is a fierce advocate for patients and has some great insights into the failings of the current framework. Jenna has worked in public health, focusing on drug and alcohol reform for quite some time. I believe she's been working specifically in the cannabis industry since 2013. Now, she's actually an East Coast native and has been living and working in BC for about a year now. So in her words, she's been quite insulated from the lagging developments in Ontario. Thus far, there are no brick and mortar stores yet open in the province, with an estimated date of April, but nothing has been confirmed yet. Enter Sarah Hanlon, outspoken cannabis advocate and, for this episode, the eyes and ears on the ground in Ontario. Aside from her work as a vocal cannabis advocate, you might also know Sarah as a winner of Big Brother Canada and popular media personality. So this episode highlights the impact of poor accessibility for medical patients, lack of education for consumers, and the contentious issue of what constitutes public health when it comes to regulating the legal cannabis landscape. Interestingly, one of the main points about harm reduction was raised, but not for the community. Actually, it was applied to cannabis patients who seem to have fallen by the wayside when it comes to the emerging policies. For many people, cannabis is a lifeline, and already we've seen the system undercutting patient supplies and increasing costs, pushing consumers towards the black market. Policymakers are yet to establish a viable alternative to diffuse this ongoing issue. Thus far, attempts to integrate cannabis into a legal framework have fallen short of expectations. The failing of policymakers to accurately consider the impact of a functional system for consumers will inevitably be the downfall of the legal system. That is, of course, until we give people better access and education at reasonable prices. So this was a super interesting episode to me, as I really had quite little understanding of what went into developing the framework and was rather surprised to hear how little of it was informed by the people who live and work in cannabis. Before we go any further, of course, Sessions is made possible with the help of our awesome sponsors. Are you thinking of growing your own cannabis? Well, grow organically with Sonoma Seeds. You'll find the best cannabis strains from around the world at sonomaseeds.com. Hemper. It's the best 420 subscription service and online head shop. Their experts hand-pick 10 items every month to pack into your Hemper box, delivering $100 of value for only $29.99 right to your door. All boxes are shipped in plain packaging since Hemper values your privacy as much as their own. Visit hemper.co for more info. We're also giving away some prizes. 2 reviewers each week get a chance to win a copy of the Herb Life magazine, which was just released, by the way, and you can get your copy online at theherblifestyle.com, featuring some great articles from some very talented writers, including myself. So make sure you leave a review. Remember, when leaving a review, leave your handle as well so that we can actually get in touch with you. At the end of the season, we have a grand prize giveaway of the PAX Vaporizer. Reviews help us build street cred and also gives me a huge boost in confidence. Post your thoughts on whichever platform you are using to listen to Sessions. For more great Herb Life content, make sure you check us out online at theherblifestyle.com and follow us on whichever social channels we have in common. And now, without further ado, Jenna and Sarah.
Sarah, Jenna!
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on here. This is very exciting.
I'm excited too. Sorry for all the confusion today.
Oh, not at all. It's great to hear your voice.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to the Herb Life for having us here today. I'm your host, Jenna Valeriani. When thinking about who I wanted to interview today, I thought about things like, what makes me passionate about cannabis, who I admire, and the kinds of things that we really need to be talking more about. I wanted to choose a guest I've had really good conversations with in the past, but also really has a different set of expertise than myself. I chose someone who I think's been really instrumental in kind of changing perceptions around cannabis, and who the people using cannabis actually are through their own advocacy and media work, particularly with kind of the more general Canadian public. And I think a lot of the times we're really all guilty of kind of preaching to the choir. So I think any kind of meaningful attempts to engage kind of the general Canadian public and counter the stigma that is often attached to cannabis use is really, really important. So I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, who is really well known in the cannabis community and really doesn't need an introduction because she was also the winner of Season 3 Big Brother Canada. Sarah Hanlon's with us today all the way from Ontario, and she's a freelance writer and content creator focusing on all things cannabis and pop culture. So thanks so much for being here, Sarah.
Jenna! That was the sweetest intro. Oh my gosh, I'm blushing over here. You get me. That was like really, really sweet. And I am honored to be here. So thank you so much for having me. You are someone I totally admire and look up to, and are kind of like a goalpost when I think of like how to do things right. So thank you so much. I'm really excited.
So how are things going over there in Ontario right now?
Oh, well, everyone's super happy about how things are going here. Not. They just did the lottery, obviously, for cannabis retail here in Ontario. And actually, I'm from Hamilton, and they voted today on whether they're going to have retail or not. So the vote hasn't gone through yet. I haven't heard about it yet. So we'll see. So everything's kind of still up in the air in Ontario. It feels like, not much has changed since legalization, really.
Yeah, I'm originally from Ontario. I've been living out here in Van for a year. I've been watching the Ford Nightmare kind of like really take hold from a wider lens, I think, than just cannabis. But, really focusing on the development of like workable distribution channels in the province just really reveals, I think, how chaotic things are seeming over there. In Vancouver, like I'm feeling a bit insulated over here from supply issues in that, a lot of the dispensaries that, had business licenses from the city before, it's really been business as usual. So I haven't really felt like my personal supply has been disrupted, pre or post legalization. But I know that most people in Canada, especially in Ontario, are really trying to find what their functioning distribution system actually looks like. What has access been like over there in Hamilton? Like, where have you been accessing? Has it gotten more difficult or kind of the same?
So it seems business as usual. So I have access to just through the people who I always have. But also I do have my medical license still too, so that helps me like fill any gaps I need. And then also around Hamilton, I frequent all these dispensaries all the time, and they are still bumping. And they are like, there's one by my house, and sometimes they used to have this sign, it was $5 grams, and it was just like steady flow of people in and out all day. And then I would tell people like, dude, they got $5 grams in Hamilton. Like the government they got nothing on this, right? And then 2 weeks later, the sign was $3 grams. And it's not terrible weed. It's not bad weed. So, and they're seeing like people of all, as diverse clientele as you could see. I go in and out of there every day. So, it's, very business as usual. And I wanted to go back because I appreciate you saying about the Doug Ford thing from a bigger scope, because I really do appreciate that. I think at a certain point, there was like this fantasy for cannabis enthusiasts that he was going to somehow be like this cannabis savior. And I mean, like, A, I never bought that for a single second. And then B, even if that was the case, like, I'm not willing and will never be willing to like sacrifice other issues for cannabis. And so I appreciate you saying that, because it's hard to distinguish all that from itself. His kind of closed door, non-transparent way of government is like directly playing into how the cannabis thing is going to work out, right? And so
absolutely. And I think when he was running too, and he started saying all of this stuff around private retail and cannabis, I started thinking to myself, shit, that's really going to charm, a kind of audience that maybe is more of like a one issue kind of voting, approach to what they were going to do. I think people were really sick of Wynn as well. So any alternative seemed like a better alternative. But even the way they pivoted so last minute, this idea that, the Ontario Cannabis Store already had, kind of leases being put in place. And then it really felt last minute, like a last minute pivot when the Ford government came in. And I think those residual effects are really being felt now, even with this, this new lottery approach, especially just choosing 25 shops, but also kind of the timeline that they need to open from here to April is one of the most aggressive timelines I've ever seen for any kind of like movement, especially when there's regulation involved. So that was kind of freaky, and I don't know how those 25 operators are going to make those deadlines. And if that means they're just basically giving up their, a big chunk of cash to be able to do it.
Freaky is definitely the word. Like from what I'm seeing people talk at, like when I see and hear this, I'm just like, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen regulations in whether it's alcohol or gambling or tobacco, or not that I'm like any expert in any of these things, but like you watch things, you hear about businesses, like you never hear like this kind of Willy Wonka style, which I love Willy Wonka in the movie, don't get me wrong. I'm all for a lottery, a fun style lottery, but this is absolutely the worst kind of zany plan you could come up with. And like you said, like the timelines, the money restrictions, who knows, so much of it is behind closed doors. It's just like really, we still don't know like anything.
Yeah, when I first heard about the lottery, there was totally a side of me that was kind of like, maybe this kind of levels the playing field in the sense that, now it's not about how much resources that you have or the connections that you have, but quite literally it's a lottery. But I mean, the whole other side of that is, that Toronto itself could hold 25 licenses. So could, Hamilton could definitely run 25 stores on its own, and they would all be busy.
Right, exactly.
So 70,000 applications that the AGCO received, and sole proprietorships made up over 60% of the overall applications submitted. So around 30% were corporations. But, there was a side of me at first that was really thinking this would maybe be a fairer way to do it. But I mean, I think by and large, that really isn't the case. I'm not even sure that the entry requirements were high enough to weed out those who were serious and those who were maybe less serious. But it seemed like a really easy thing to do.
Yeah. And like, just because it seemed like one of those giveaways on Instagram where they're like, I'm going to pick randomly and, you have no idea how these people are picking anything, and at the end of the day, it's like, it's just like you said, it could have been, even if it was transparent, super fair, even if they're the 25 best places, the 25 most, like in the community, well-rounded, business oriented. I mean, it's not going to, the access there's no way it comes close to what is needed. So setting it up for failure.
Yeah. And even thinking about we don't know really what the expertise of the people who did win the draw actually is. So it'll be really interesting to see how kind of that shapes up long term. And the other thing I've been kind of...
Well, it just, and it always makes me come back to, it's just, there is a system in place, right? And you could go to these places like you would a restaurant or whatever and check it out, and like whatever they're worried about, selling to minors, or if testing the weed, they could do all those things. And that seems a hell of a lot simpler than every type of plan that they've come up with and continue to kind of come up with, right?
Absolutely. And also from my perspective, I was kind of looking at that being like, why not let the OCS open their 40 stores to start out with, and then do a public-private hybrid model, and then introduce your licensing to private stores as well, just to have kind of kept things on track. But instead, I can't imagine how much money the OCS dumped into brick and mortar stores only for that all to be rescinded